All right, let's talk about the final subtype for INFJs, harmonizing. What does a harmonizing INFJ look like?
All right. So these are, I think, actually, interestingly enough, most of the time with most types, the harmonizing is a subtype that people don't even know exists. They don't see people as, like particularly we recently recorded the episode on ESTPs.
Yeah.
And when we talked about the ESTP subtype or a harmonizing subtype, it's like you could tell that these are people who probably mistyped themselves as intuitives and feelers all over the place. We just don't think of that as an ESTP subtype. But I would say that the harmonizing INFJ subtype might be everybody's image in their mind of an INFJ.
The stereotype.
This is the stereotype. Yeah, it's really fascinating. But I think INFJs are always they're just kind of topsy-turvy in most things that have to do with brain wiring. So this is the far-seeing, the philosophical, the poetic, the spiritual, the ethereal INFJ.
The sage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. These are the sophisticated, unique INFJs as well. And
wait, the others are unsophisticated? Is that what you're saying?
Well, Dario mentions that it is not uncommon to start with the more assertive versions when we're young, particularly creative or dominant. And harmonizing INFJs are clustered later in life. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes we can be raised, or an INFJ could be raised to be the harmonizing subtype from a young age. And if that's the case, they're not going to get all the benefits of it being a subtype that the INFJ has grown into. So some of that language of the sophisticated INFJ is going to be a harmonizing INFJ later in life, not one that just gets to have that. But this is more the INFJ that we're thinking of, the sage-like, sophisticated, sort of spiritual, in tune INFJ.
Yeah.
And they also have that zigzag pattern, like the normalizing. But then they have another sort of specialized way of interacting, which is the thing that's common to harmonizing. So they, as usual, they're attentive to voice tonality, right? They're very tuned into language. They are tuned into narratives, symbols, visual patterns, and social feedback, right? They're looking for a lot of social feedback with that second function. But they're not as adept at language as other INFJs are. Interestingly enough, they're the ones that sort of struggle to communicate more than the other subtypes do. And even more so than the creatives. The creative subtypes will still, all they need is a little bit of auditory perk up, and then they can get into communicating and expressing. This INFJ is tuned into it, but they're not as good at communicating what's going on inside their mind as the other subtype. So they have a little bit of a deficiency there. And in fact, they also can kind of struggle to do day-to-day life. Just like the creative subtype, they can kind of they sort of struggle to fit into society and interface with it and aren't 100% sure how to communicate. That said, they can choose any profession, but advising other people, that is this subtype's name of the game. This is the thing that they do the best, is advising. And so careers like counseling, healthcare, mystical or shamanistic arts, they are very good at understanding cross-cultural components, and they're extremely good at holding multiple points of view with a detachment. So they're really good at observing and seeing a complex system of interacting perspectives without it taking it personally at all, and then being able to advise another person. So obviously, therapist is up there, psychologist is up there, and anything that really needs that capacity to be able to see that bigger picture and to advise another person on how to navigate through it.
So this is much more of a responsive, taking the needs that are around them, open INFJ to the energy. Meaning, I would also then posit, we could say they're probably the most vulnerable of all the four subtypes to outside energies assaulting them.
Yes, I would actually say that the challenge, the disadvantage, other than just kind of trying to figure out how to interface with society, the challenge is that they can look passive. Right? Yeah. This is part of the challenge of communicating, sort of their ideas, the struggle with that. There's a passivity to this type. And so because of that, they really prefer to work one-on-one with people. or even solo, right? By themselves, away from others, or just one-to-one, or to be somebody who is, sort of brought in as a revered guest to communicate and then move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not, unlike the dominant, and this is actually the opposite of the dominant subtype, there's no love of an audience, right? There's like almost like a reticence to be in front of an audience.
Yeah. So I can imagine if you find yourself leaning more toward the harmonizing INFJ, if you're an INFJ listening, you may want to attach yourself to people who can, not a little bit different than the creative with a platform thinking, where you're going to get on YouTube and create your videos. You might want to find some people you trust that you know can continue to put you in front of people that need your services. In other words, maybe you are a coach or a counselor in a larger organization, and the organization and the people that are leaderships, in the leadership there, identify your talents, and they can keep bringing you clients or work that you can be your best self around. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's a people-focused strategy for you to find career options. Your network is probably very important, being a harmonizing subtype, maybe even more than the other three, because the people you tend to work with, they have to know your value, because you're probably not going to be the type that's going to continue to put yourself out there. Like, I'm really valuable. Look at how much value I can bring. You need an advocate that can almost market you or talk about how valuable you are and get the clients or get the work or get the energy to you so you can do your best work with them.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That'd be my strategy to an INFJ that leans this direction.
Yeah, there's such a subtlety to this subtype that you're going to have to be in a context that appreciates those little things.
Yeah.
And there's also, just like the creative subtype, where like, go do something that allows you to constantly and perpetually learn. This is a subtype that I would say find something that allows you to stay connected to something esoteric or spiritual.
Yeah.
Like, find something that allows you to be appreciated and in something that's more of the sort of the subtleties of the deeper connections with others and walking them through an experience, or sort of really understanding the depth of another person. Like, if you are a therapist, you might have to be one of those that is word of mouth, that everybody's like, they're amazing. What do? I can't even explain it. It was incredible. Go do it. And so it's more in that vein.
Yeah.
Now, again, let's talk about the geeky part.
Yeah. Well, so I was just going to say the chemical neurotransmitter is estrogen for this subtype.
Yes.
And let's talk about the functions. How are they attuned?
Okay. So for the type geeks out there, this is the opposite of the dominant. So both of the functions, both introverted intuition and extroverted feeling, they're going to be holistic. It's input. It's receptive. That's why it appears to be passive. That's why it's subtle. It's got a more diffused energy in it. And that's one of the reasons why this subtype, this INFJ subtype, shies away from the public light, shies away from being on stage, and will be probably the one that looks the most hesitant to put themselves out there. Now, what's important to remember is that we are not locked into any of these subtypes. If there's something about your subtype that you wish were a little different, you have access to the other subtypes to wake up that part of your personality. So if you are, say, a holistic, INFJ, and you wish you had more assertive qualities, the creative version is available to you. You can start to build a more analytic version of that introverted intuition, or I would say put yourself in positions of, say, performance or doing things that kind of put you out there a little bit more, and that'll wake up the creative subtype version. Or you also have the normalizing available to you, and you could go towards more of a steadiness, sort of more of an assertive kind of figure out how to just stay inspired and just keep going and going and going in a more sort of traditional context, like a 9-to-5 job. So again, it's not just that you're looking for careers that suit you and your subtype. You're looking for careers that will help you become the kind of person you want to become. So if you choose a career that is suited for a certain subtype that isn't yours, it is likely to wake those aspects of yourself up. Now, it might not be easy, right? It might take a little bit of growth and development and might be tough, but it will help you grow into the kind of person you want to be. So it's really about figuring out that sort of center of the Venn diagram of a career that suits me and a career that allows me to grow into these different skills and capacities that the other subtypes offer.